There we go, everyone. We're live across all the different countries in the world. It's always the hardest part hosting these and waiting in that room ready to enter it with a bang. But I'm glad all of you can join us. We'll give everyone a minute or two to get settled. I know I'm looking forward to things. I have two amazing guests, all with more handsome photos than me. Welcome, Eric and Carl.
Great to be here.
Thank you, DW. You're too modest.
Yes, I'm not sure if we should use that photo anymore. It's probably a shade of what I used to be. But just while everyone's getting in the room, I'd love to put together a quick poll just around whether or not you can hear us. Sometimes there's a few little audio issues with the platform, so just make sure that you've set your default audio device correctly. And if you do reset it, give it the old refresh, and that should do the trick after you've changed devices. So it should be smooth sailing from here. So we'll see what everyone says, and it's 100% yes so far. So let's hope there's no no's on that front. Before we dive into the material of today's talk, maybe we can introduce ourselves a little bit. I think Eric and Carl, I wanted to do this in a fun way where we share one unexpected fact about ourselves. And I didn't spring this on you right now. You had a little bit of time to think about it. So maybe, Carl, you can kick us off. Tell us about yourself and something fun.
Thank you, Dale. I happy to. Yeah, my name is Carl Carrell. I'm one of 4 co-founders of GetAccept. Since we started in 2015, I've been working closely with many companies, particularly when it comes to the quote-to-cash process, proposals, pricing, and so forth. So I'm very excited to having this discussion about lead to ledger. And something very different about me, when I was 19 years old, I got very disappointed I didn't get into the college that I wanted to go. So I ordered one-way ticket to Argentina, ended up living with 4 guys from the countryside and learning how to listen to fire and cook with fire, and particularly pertaining to listening to the fire and how it's cooking the meat. So I really do enjoy being by the barbecue when I get those opportunities to do so. So that's a quick little unknown fact about me, Dale.
Beautiful. I love it. And what about you, Eric? Any experience with fire?
Definitely, it also has to pertain to cooking.
Nice segue.
Yeah, so real quick, I'm Eric Chan. I lead partnerships at Chargebee. That involves essentially our tech partners program, solution partners, and then also channel sales. Yeah, we're very much involved with contract negotiation, helping sales close deals. So this is, while it's not directly related to closing sales, it's definitely a big part of our job. So one interesting fun fact. So a number of years ago, I worked for a car company, and one of the best jobs I think I've had was pretty much every month I got to drive a brand new car, whether or not it was actually released or it was publicly available. And it really got me to appreciate actually all the design and the engineering effort that's actually put into driving a car and having the sort of feel, as well as all of the gadgets and all the cool stuff that you see in modern cars.
Beautiful. So if we have any other car lovers in here with us today, post your favorite car in the chat. We'd love to hear about it. And that's another good segue into how to use the chat now. The chat will be open for all of you to contribute throughout the webinar. It's boring if it's just a 3-person conversation. Instead, we'd like to have a conversation with all of you. So please put forward all your opinions. And this is live, and that proves that we're not pre-recording this. So put us to the test and ask some tough questions or get involved. And even if you disagree with us, let us know. We'd like to share that out together. We'll also be using a few more polls, so it should be a fun journey going forward. And my fun fact is I like Carl's outdoor theme. So a couple of nights ago, I kayaked to a random island here in Sydney and pitched a tent on it and slept the night. And that's my way to relax, by getting out there amongst the stars. And now I've got 2 stars with me, so let's use them and their knowledge, and let's dig into today's material. So today we're talking about something that's, as we mentioned in preparation for this webinar, extremely difficult to go out and find dependable, solid information that isn't surface level, and that's the quote to cash process. So, Carl, do you agree that it's hard to find information about best practices here online?
Yeah, no, 100%. It's very difficult to get any type of uniform message when you Google quote to cash. There is, first of all, the definition of what is quote to cash is really hard, and I think a hot topic. Then also, I think the willingness from companies to share parts of this process, because I think it's by default is very difficult, and it is quite complex for everyone, which means there's no standardized way of sharing information and knowledge about it. So yeah, it's very difficult.
And do you think that when we look at these 3 areas, where do you think is one of the areas that poses the greatest challenge?
I think personally it's the complex buying teams and negotiations. I think that is one of the biggest challenges that we face, is the communication between both the buying team and the vendor, meaning that there are so many people involved, and when and where and how to communicate the information is not very easy to navigate, and very much down to just having good account executives and product specialists that have had experience from this, but generally not very much part of training for sales teams or pre-sales.
And those beliefs we can see manifested in your desire to create GetAccept, which I know is very focused around that buyer and seller communication. Eric, on your end, we have this statistic around over discounting being a huge problem, but there's also some other problems that we can see here popping up. In your opinion, where do you think a lot of this friction lies in the quote to cash process?
I think it's, to your point, or maybe recently having met with our legal team to kind of think about some of this stuff, is everyone would like you to sign the standard contract, and legal views it as how many deviations per contract, or maybe how many deviations in a given month or given quarter do these contracts kind of go outside the norm. And discounting can certainly be one of them, but think about all the components where it slows down the deal, but also creates potentially unnecessary complexity. And so, having a strong framework in place, strong processes, and even some kind of better guidelines to help make that complexity get isolated, maybe to more of like a multiple choice option would be great. That's where I see some of the things happening. So.
And for all of you on the webinar right now, where do you think the greatest area of friction is in the quote to cash process? If we focus on the top line message around over discounting, why don't we set up a poll for that now? So if you think over discounting is a problem, you can vote yes or no, and we'll see what all of us think between us. When I conducted some research for this webinar, so as part of my role, I run sales research at a sister company to GetAccept called Sales Research Labs, and we found that the average sales cycle time was the main area of focus for a lot of sales ops and revenue operations leaders at good companies like HubSpot, Checker. They were very much concerned about deals getting held up by some of these manual processes. So throughout this webinar, we'll discuss and go in depth on some of those, so the listeners here can take those away. One framing question, I think, though, is when we talk about the textbook definition of quote to cash, normally it starts at actually physically generating that quote in a system like Salesforce, SAP, or HubSpot. What about Eric? In your experience, where do you think this process actually starts?
So I think a lot of people think about, might be marketing, but I actually think it's really focused on, are you setting the right expectations when you start training your salespeople, right? Are they actually being taught how to actually construct a deal rather than just the art of selling the product or service that your company is making?
And Carl, what about yourself? When do you think it starts, the quote to cash?
No, and I think to Eric's point, I agree 100% that it's about when and how do we train our reps, so sales enablement essentially. There's also other issues that come into today. We host a lot of information on different pages. For example, if we take GetAccept, we have pricing publicly available on our website. We have pricing publicly available on G2 Crowd, Capterra, Gartner, etc. So first of all, making sure that all this information is available, and that we train our reps also to how to present price and when to present price. I think on the subject before of over discounting usually starts with reps knowing there's an ability to discount. Thus, they actually start the discounting before even a client have requested any amendments to price, and that's the standard that we see a lot of times, particularly from my perspective being on the buying end as well. A lot of times is people actually give the pre-discounted price, not the list price that is available, and that obviously opens up to more discussions about, oh, I realized that, oh, I can maybe get a little bit of lower price because they went down by 20% initially. So I think there's a lot of things there when it comes to transparency and training, and really doing that from the beginning. And as Eric said as well, with marketing, it has to be available as well in the same way how we communicate on our landing pages online, as well as how the reps are communicating. So we actually have a uniform message.
So the main takeaway for the listeners here is that quote to cash doesn't just start inside the CRM, it starts before, and you need to have a strategy to involve marketing and brand to get that alignment, and also sales enablement efforts to make sure that your reps are saying the right things when it comes to your pricing structures. Another interesting point, Eric, that I heard, I was speaking with one of the revenue operations leaders at a company called Frontify, very fast growing European company. And they believe that quote to cash, they agreed with us that it starts earlier, but they also say it ends later. So we should be thinking about renewals and years in advance, because in essentially they're all upsell, cross sells, and requoting moments. Do you agree with that it's quite full cycle?
Yeah, so let's try to be positive and think that you're going to deliver a good customer experience, so that when it comes time for renewal, not only will they sign up for a new contract, but it's hopefully an increase, right? It actually goes up because they're happy and they're going to increase the amount of usage or consumption that they want to buy. If you think about the over discounting problem, that really doesn't set yourselves up for really trying to sell on value, because you've already discounted so heavily. Your ability to ask for an incremental amount multiplied by the consumption that would take place really doesn't help yourself, right? And so really trying to focus on value, really trying to focus on what headaches or what pain points we're trying to take away, rather than that final number, because I think as you look at the type of customers you want to go after, who you want to sell on value, they don't actually mind paying for something if they really can understand where the value is, right? I've seen quite a few deals from our sales team where the initial deal, whom they were competing with, was just focused on price, and they ended up going with us and paying more, because they said that we are really focused on solving their problems, and they're willing to pay a premium if those problems really get addressed, rather than just, oh, what's the best deal you can give me? Can you go lower? Can you go lower?
So these are some interesting lessons for pricing and how we actually configure the quotes to be appealing to buyers, and reminds me of when we were talking just before this started about premium liquor brands. And don't be afraid to charge more if you do more and you're better, okay? So you don't have to be the bottom end of the market. It's okay to be the leader. When we talk about pricing, though, we do have one of the world's experts here in Eric, and there's several configuration needs for your quote to cash system depending on the type of business you do. Would you care to elaborate a little bit on this for us?
Sure. So we kind of see the world as kind of two models today. So transactional commerce. So think of that as going to a store, picking your items, and then checking out. And then there's kind of where Chargebee and a few other companies sit, which is on the subscription side. So think of that, it could be called a prescription medication, it could be called a gym membership, could be that subscription box that gets sent to you, or even your Netflix, right? These are all different examples of subscription commerce where you're either paying for something to be delivered to you either as a replenishment, or it's something that you're consuming on an ongoing basis. And so for there, how you need to think about that is whether or not you're just purely looking on the billing and configuration for a transaction history. So that would be, just simply buying something one time. Or are you looking at it as purchase history, so the actual subscription plan, but also the amount of consumption? Mm-hmm. On the transaction side, you're looking really around managing inventory, because stockouts or a particular color or something that's not available, that's really detrimental to the business. But on a subscription point of view, you already know what the demand is. You know what your inventory level should be, and it's really around how are you optimizing your rates, so that again, both sides, the merchant and the customer, are getting the most value. Last but not least, if you think about focus, in transaction models, you're really trying to get the lead to make that initial purchase, right? So if I can convince you to come to my restaurant over another one, or my shop versus another one, I'm really trying to just get that first sale. But as DW mentioned, as you think about subscription, that's not really the most important thing. The most important thing is actually around retention and expansion. Once you have the customer with you, I think this is statistically 6 times cheaper to try to upsell them and retain them than trying to go and acquire a new customer. So these different models of how you want to build your company, build your rate plans, really do have this downstream impact. So when you're thinking about trying to drive value in your contracts and your sale, think about it beyond just the close.
Amazing. And it's interesting when we talk about subscription billing, I also see that leaking into the B2C world. I remember in the States, Amazon, after a couple months, suggesting that I subscribe to the toilet paper brand that I use. And at first I was slightly offended, because I thought, hey, are they inferring that I use a little too much toilet paper? It made me feel self-conscious. But in essence, it was convenient for me and what was best, because I'd be saving a couple of dollars a month. So when we design these systems, it's really important that we take into account the customer behavior and also the way the sales team engages to design pricing models that suit their needs and support them as they grow. So that being said, I think there's a great time to have one of our poll questions. How do you look at pricing in your organization? Is it a flat rate? Is it usage-based? Or is it a combination of the two? In talking with many of the companies to gather the research for this, it was a combination of the two, and that posed a number of different difficulties. So please share with us your background via that poll. And if we move forward into another area of interest here for this webinar. It's approval workflows. We all know that some of these deals are complex. They need more chefs in the kitchen. But the question is, are the chefs really the right ones to be involved? And is it going to the right people? So, Carl, what do you think about this and deals going through some kind of approval workflow?
Yeah, and I think this comes down to the design. As we said before, it's really difficult to find information how people set these things up. And I think the research that you've been doing with the Sales Research Labs, Dailius, is really almost as first of a kind into the data on how do people set up approval workflows, how does the process work, how does discounting work, and I think that's a big part of the problem here. Generally, it's not based on somebody who sat down and thought about the design of the process for discounting approvals. It's usually been a reactive process, meaning for these types of size of deals, we need to work with legal and we need approval from our internal finance departments or ops department to be able to confirm this. And I think that's the main issue that we see is it's a reactive process versus a proactive process. So I think our recommendation and my recommendation would be to sit down and actually map the process, understand how is it today, has it changed since we set up the process, and what are the actual problems that we have. It's very similar to building software. If you build software on a hunch on what clients need, you will very rarely hit the mark on what they actually need and deliver. It needs to be in conjunction and discussing with clients and understanding what the needs are to be able to produce an effective process that actually provides value and helps the clients to get to that moment where they can actually get started with your product, get delivery or service.
And Eric, at Chargebee, do you have approval workflows in place right now? I know sometimes a subtle plug for GetAccept. GetAccept can help with those from time to time, no?
Yeah, so we do have an approval workflow. So all of these discount ranges and contract terms. I really like the quote that you have there from HubSpot. We definitely believe in that philosophy as well. An example of that is, if we're willing to offer a discount, are you willing to offer a testimonial? Once the thing is live and running, to show that you've made the right decision. I think a side comment beyond just this approval workflow that people should be thinking about is, when do you want to involve leadership? And so one of the thoughts is, if it's a small deal, maybe we don't need senior leadership. But if it's a fairly large deal, can you introduce leadership earlier in the deal cycle? Because then when you get to these approval workflows, you're not just introducing, Dailius as you've had before. You're sort of head of sales, and you're kind of coming in to try to iron out the commercials. Well, what would happen if you had already at least had one brief meeting, or Carl, what if you were brought in sort of somewhere near the middle rather than towards the end? Does that actually help expedite the approval workflow because you've already established some kind of relationship and rapport? Or is that maybe an ability to maybe push back harder, when they're asking for a bigger discount, or some other things that might seem out of the ordinary?
And some interesting points on this topic that I thought I'd raise quickly is around approvals. We see roughly more than 10% of deals going for some kind of approval seems to be abnormal. Would you agree with that? Do you keep a percentage rating, or do you watch those numbers at GetAccept and Chargebee to make sure that a certain number of deals are moving through, or you don't mind, you just care about the top line revenue numbers being hit? Maybe Carl, I'd love your input there.
Happy to start. No, I think initially when we had a very manual process when we started GetAccept, but as the team have grown, we've had much more standardized way of educating about pricing, so people understand what can they communicate. For example, we do not offer discounts if the client is not willing to look at a multi-year contract or a prepaid contract that is off from the standard 1-year term. So that's just the first part, meaning that I actually communicate the correct thing to the clients. But when it comes to approvals, we see around that percentage as well, around 10%. But it's a much more standardized way, and that's based now on permissions in our own platform, which we use, obviously, GetAccept. We take our own medication in this sense, and there we have approvals based on if it's a sizable deal and it's a higher number, and certain other parts that we talk about in terms of terms. For example, we have in every single way, we actually use standardized terms and agreements that are always linked to the contract. So we actually get the clients to focus what are unique for the client and what is standardized for the client, so they can understand what they can ask about and where we can make changes to a contract, for example.
One interesting perspective here too is that I was speaking with the ex-head of revenue operations at G2 Crowd, Brad Rosen, who's now president at Sales Assembly. And he was saying that it doesn't really matter, in his opinion, whether or not you have rules around discounting, because he proposed the example that if you had 2 reps and one discounted fully for 50% and the other did 0, and then you had a similar situation where both reps discounted 25, then you'd still end up at the same revenue number at the end of the day, disregarding the discount. So in his opinion, it's better off to focus on, is the team actually hitting the targets that you need as a whole? And if not, then you can go back and look at some of these rules and processes. But it's about removing red tape. I thought that was an interesting take coming from such a large organization with a very strong sales team. But we can probably dig into this topic all day. If you're listening and you have some interesting approval workflows that you'd like to share, or different questions about whether or not you think you need certain types of approval workflows, please just write something quickly in the comments and we'll get to it. Another area that I think is important is the deal desk. And we mentioned that 10% figure. I also think this is an interesting number, Eric, in terms of how long do you think it should take to turn around something customized? So in the instance that we do need to modify a contract or put together an SLA that's customized, did you have any comments around how long you think it should be taking internally?
Yeah, I mean, if it's very complex and you're trying to get some alignment, it shouldn't take anything more than a day or two. And the reason why I say that is because the whole point of the deal desk should be that you're trying to handle these odd situations. But if you think of the span of control or the span of possibilities, unless it's something very, very unusual that the team hasn't encountered before, you should already think about how to anticipate that. And so formulating these custom quotes should be a lot faster than taking a week's time or something like that.
So Eric must be a genius or have some psychic ability, because we have that same point there. So amazing insight, spot on the money. But moving forward as well, I think we need to talk about how we send these quotes and how we engage people through the process, because I asked, probably interviewed about 8 or 9 people in the last 7 days for this. And when I said, how do you make the quoting process exciting? Or do you have a secret that you use internally to getting deals done? And everyone seemed to be stumped by that question. They just thought, isn't it just sending out a quote? Isn't it pretty straightforward? And we don't look at it the same at GetAccept, do we, Carl?
No, we definitely don't, and I think that's the reason why GetAccept exists is to produce as close to, you mentioned Amazon. Amazon has been the go-to place for B2C commerce and how to buy in a modern way, where reviews, information, everything is available to the buyer. And the modern way today is B2B is going more and more to how B2C worked a couple of years ago, and it was quite unthinkable just actually before the pandemic, seeing $100,000 deals passing by, or funding passing by to software companies who actually haven't met investors, or deals passing by just because we haven't met each other, we haven't seen the team. So what we mean is the importance of creating a modern and an easy way to understand for all the different stakeholders, particularly when we're selling B2B. It means that there's more stakeholders involved on both ends. So, for example, when a CFO or somebody who needs to sign off on an agreement, how do we present that information to him so he understands, for example, that the buying team have made their due diligence, they've checked out the terms, they've gone through the legal process. And that's how we think it's important to combine a quote with, for example, a link to terms and conditions and accepting the terms and conditions, rather than including 30 pages of T's and C's on the actual quote and contract that they're signing off of. That's an easy example. Using video to educate the people. For example, having an intro video to when they hit the pricing page and where should they look, what has been changed, what are the specific terms available to them, what has the team negotiated, and so forth. So there's a lot of things to do there on how to educate the client, what to present to what stakeholders at what time in an easy and understandable fashion. And I think that's the key. And again, taking the Amazon as an example, I know exactly when I go to Amazon on how to understand which product is the best, how to understand reviews, how to understand what the differences are between the products and so forth. So that's an extremely important thing to aim for B2C commerce excellence, even in B2B.
And we have so many, I think all of us could spitball tips and tricks here. For everyone listening, one thing to think about, I just heard Carl mention reviews. When you send out a quote or final contract, when do you actually send it and the person that you send it to is the one that signs it? Often it gets forwarded around to several stakeholders in the organization. Don't forget to put reviews and customer evidence in those formal documents, because highly likely, maybe if it's the CFO signing off as the final signer, they most likely don't even know who you are. They've just been instructed internally to consider signing this proposal. So infuse that customer proof there. And we actually have a good integration for software companies to use a G2 crowd widget in all of those quotes and contracts they send out. Another thing too, Carl, you mentioned video. What happens if you're someone like me and I have, a face for radio? I don't really like doing videos too much. I'm a bit self-conscious. Is there evidence that shows that even people like me should be using video too?
There definitely is, and we've been tracking our metrics at GetAccept for thousands and thousands of clients and millions of the proposals and quotes and contracts. And one of the biggest indicators of a contract actually getting closed is if video is part of that process. And it's been different throughout the years, but it averages between 35 and 45% increased win rate if video is part of a contract or proposal. And that's independent of industry, that's independent of geographic locations. So I think if that's not the number that hits home for everyone, that you should include video, then you're leaving 35 to 45% on the table, or at least you may lose some deals against your biggest competitors. How do you stand out? How are you different? How do you anticipate the questions that you will usually be able to handle in a boardroom, sitting, going through the contract, and using video instead to again, educate the client, to go through and anticipate the questions and getting them smooth and safely to feeling comfortable with trusting you guys to buy your product or service. I think that's the main reason why you should use video.
Well, Carl, you've inspired us to look at quotes in a new way, and maybe after this, I'll stop being scared of video, get a nice haircut like Eric, and maybe put some makeup on in my next video so I feel better about it. But going forward into the future, and I love this. I watched one of those great movies, Back to the Future 2, the other day, and now we have to step and all be three Marty McFlys and think about what is the future of quote to cash. Eric, do you see some exciting changes ahead?
So one of them, I 100% agree with Carl there, that that previous slide where you just had the invoice, you really need to turn it away from just being purely transactional, right? What's the PO number? Where can I ship it to? Here's the amount, and here's it's going to be. I mean, we're very much beyond that, where it's very much personal selling, right? Making people feel good about the decision they're making, getting alignment with multiple stakeholders, and so because of that, once you've trying to drive that behavior, then you have to kind of deliver on the promise, and the promise should be, hey, I made a decision to go with you. You were the best choice for us. How do I make that relationship frictionless so that I don't really have to think more about, delivery or the invoice coming on time, or maybe when the renewal comes, it's just like clockwork, right? We should be really focused on, how do I help drive more value for your business? Am I providing the right set of solutions to help grow your business? And so all of this, quote to cash part kind of becomes in the background, when unfortunately sometimes it's in the foreground, like, oh, there was an error in the invoice. There was, something, the renewal terms aren't right. You said you were going to the enablement or the training, but now it's being charged again, right? So all of these little subtle things that you thought you cemented the relationship well can come back to get you if you're not thinking about it as a user experience after.
Yes. So takeaway for everyone listening is making that a smooth, integrated experience. It should almost be like once you use a product and get involved, it's so easy, and even paying for it, it's just like a dream. And you wake up in a state where you're doing better than ever, and you don't even notice maybe the minus $10,000 on your credit card. You're just happy and ready to keep growing with that product you've just purchased. Although it does make it sweeter if the sales team sends something fun over, like some donuts or some goodies. So make sure you can use now modern products to automate that in your quote to cash process. And it's crazy. There's so many ideas out there right now to make this more fun and to make this more streamlined now and into the future. So we have a couple of suggestions here. Carl, out of these or something else, what are you most excited about, especially as a founder of a business that's looking at this sector?
Yeah, there's actually two things that I think about. It's the deal rooms. So again, I mean, that's obviously what we're trying to build at GetAccept, is the possibility to automate and produce all the communication and all the content available in one experience where everything's available to the right stakeholders at the right time. But the other part, I think the story about pricing that I think is really relevant. At GetAccept, we have made a transition to be a product-led company, which I think is probably the hottest buzzword on the software market today. I see Eric nodding. I think we're all thinking about how to be more product-led, but usage-based pricing. So with our new release of pricing, we actually took the leap to look at more at usage-based rather than looking at features and pricing certain parts of the platform, and more looking how much value are we providing to a client, and thus we can charge more to our client. And that was a really tough step for us. It was the hardest product iteration and the absolutely toughest discussions when it came to how to price this product in the best way possible. And I said, we're novice at this as well. We have just added last year to our board of directors with Bill Masaides, who comes from CMO, from Slack, Zendesk, and Salesforce, releasing fully self-service and freemium products. And it is not easy, but if you want to continue to grow, I believe this is extremely important to think about the usage-based pricing instead of just a common flat rate pricing that is one size fits all, which is really, really difficult to sell. And
I was listening to a chat the other day that said it's near impossible to do this change once you're over 5 million in revenue. You just have too many custom agreements, and you've built the system to serve some of those fringe cases. But pat on the back, we couldn't have made that transition without our friends at Chargebee and their back end helping to power that transition. So thank you, Eric, for keeping us employed, because without that, we wouldn't be here, I don't think.
I was going to say one quick thing on that note. We kind of tallied the number of models and it's close to 500 different types of subscription models that you can support with our system. And that just shows you the complexity, the customization, but also how creative actually people are thinking about when it comes to these usage-based pricing to really move away from the simple flat rate.
Amazing. It's a deep world, and that's why we've all been lucky to have you on today with that wealth of knowledge. And transitioning now to the conclusion of today's talk, how to get it right. What are some actionable takeaways? And if you want to save one slide, then I'd recommend this. This is a slide to do it. And we have a number of interesting points here. I know we were just talking about Chargebee and choosing the right billing system, but these are some of the organizational benchmarks or aims that you should be having. What do you think, maybe Eric, to wrap us up here, what's the most important point here, or is there something missing that you think the listeners should take away for their quote to cash process?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the last one. Don't send boring quotes. If you think about what you're being presented as the reader, and the fact that companies like GetAccept or Chargebee have actually spent the time to think about how you want to deliver that message, it really does show the thought process that's put into what you're actually buying. This is what you're paying for. This is what you're going to get. Obviously, the T's and C's are important, but it's nothing more important than this is what you're paying for. This is our commitment to you, and delivering that in a very straightforward and easy to understand manner. I think people love getting into the details and the complexity, but sometimes you just need to say, this is what I'm buying. This is what you're going to get, and keep it very simple. And there's an art to making sure that it's not boring.
Definitely. And Carl, what about yourself? Are you on point number 9 too? I guess it's a little bit biased given that you created the product to make them less boring, but
I want to say a combination between 1 and 8. So choosing the right billing system and a RevOps function. I think for working with issues in finance for a very, very long time. I come from a background working with finance companies, factoring companies, and billing companies. It's a big issue to actually recognize the revenue. So actually, first of all, having a function that looks and criticizes this, that's maybe not generally just part of your operations department, but actually have a bigger, broader perspective. And taking a look at how do we recognize revenue, how is the customer journey, how do we make it smooth, how do we make it easy to educate our sales reps, and how to educate our clients, what's going to happen when they sign. So I think I have a little bit of an example. For example, when a client signs, that's the moment when you should pop up the ability to fill in your billing information or put in your credit card if that's your goal with the checkout and recognizing revenue, even if it's not swiping the credit card, but getting the payment method on file. And I think for us, it was a huge difference when we got that set up with Chargebee, both giving options for ACH and direct debit payments via other services through those integrations, or popping the credit card to just populate Stripe information. It's made it so much easier for us to actually bill correctly. And sometimes it's not because the client doesn't want to pay. It's usually because we've got the wrong billing information, sending the invoice to the wrong person, who don't send it to their finance department or their accounts receivables to actually put up for payment. So small, simple things. Again, my recommendation for everyone would just be to take a look at the process, think more proactive than reactive. What has changed and what are the changes we can do to make it more of an easy process? Again, think Amazon, think the checkout, think how easy and quickly it could be versus how you built it based on needs and changes throughout the years.
Beautiful. And I might chip in a different one. I say 0.5, I think it's completely unacceptable to make customers wait, especially if they're willing to buy. And the fastest to the table with the highest amount of granularity and detail generally wins the deal, because effort in the sales process generally shows effort post-sale. And so I'm a big proponent of point number 5, but there's also a magic point number 10, and that's Ask Eric and Carl if you have further questions. So I'd like you to find Eric and Carl on LinkedIn, reach out to them if you have any further needs to explore this quote to cash realm. It can be a little bit of a black hole, but I think today we brought you out of that into the light and gave you some structured advice about how to do it better. That being said, I really thank you for joining us today on this webinar. And that's right, there's our friend with the cash. We're all about getting those deals signed. So if you have any questions, please let us know in the chat right now. We'll stay on for a minute or two. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. And we have a question quickly around what type of pricing model best suits a product-led growth company. Eric, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So product-led growth, just so we're also on the same page, it's typically going to be a self-service model. So being able to get your customer to your site or destination and have the price be placed up there up front is going to be the driver. So you should be putting your price plans on the page. It's okay if you have a call me for enterprise pricing or custom pricing, but you should always at least have 2 price plans, if not 3, because you're trying to drive that. And then last but not least, make it as automated as possible on the back end, right? Don't like DW was saying, if they're willing to buy right now, make it frictionless, make it as easy as they can to convert and buy right now.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think, Carl, if you have a culture of reps who are super heavy around discounts? It's a discount culture, and I think we joke about a very large company who we all know who discounted against themselves without us even asking on the first meeting, or I think it was the first meeting. So how do we fight that, or do you think we need to fight it? Do you agree with Brad from Sales Assembly that things just kind of work out in the right way as long as you're fighting for that same revenue target?
Yeah, I think you answered a little bit the question there, Dale, but I think first of all, it has to be a uniform way we present price. And I think there's intrinsically something wrong if you present a discounted price and if you have a public price on your webpage thinking product-led growth, and then you have a different price presented by a sales rep. I mean, then there's something wrong in that part of the process. Then you have to sit down and rethink it. How to handle a discounting culture. I think first of all you have to train all the reps the same way and don't make any exceptions. I think it should be extremely clear, like if this is the price we give or if this is the size of the company, these are what you're approved to be able to give in terms of if you're actually offering discounts, and ensuring that reps turn to you and go after the ones who discount in a wrong way, so you don't have over discounted deals. Because there's the other side that's going to happen, like you mentioned, Dale, that I think is very, very bad. If you know as a buyer on the market that this is a company you can haggle with, what do you think is going to happen? Then you also educate your clients that you're open to these types of discussions. That may be part of your tactic if that's the case, but I think it's leaving money on the table. I think you're going to leave a lot of clients unhappy because they didn't get the discount they wanted, and you're going to leave a culture within your company as well that discounting is okay. So as I said, like I don't think that's the right way to go, but I know some companies are choosing that way.
I also think to add to that, it actually may impact even your sales forecast. So think about, a company that maybe they just discount 10%, but then all of a sudden you see something discounted 25%. And then they're saying, oh, well, should I buy now? Or maybe I should wait for, the equivalent of like a Black Friday event where it's going to be 40% off. And that doesn't help the sales rep or your forecast or the company, because the company is like, yeah, I'm there, but I want to get the best deal possible. And if you have this habit of discounting, they may just wait until, there's a deal that, like you said, you're discounting against yourself, just to the point where the customer will sign across the line.
Yeah, and I think, Eric, one very important thing as well, let's say you're a subscription revenue company like ourselves. For example, look at the data. does heavily discounted clients leave? So usually what we see is the clients who scream most about price are the ones we're not able to deliver enough value to. So should we sell to them in the beginning? Will they cost more time from our success teams, our support teams than they're actually worth? Maybe we should rethink a little bit on who we're targeting and who we're selling to from the beginning, because all of our revenue and all of our success metrics is dependent on retention and upsell, and they will heavily affect those ones. And how does that affect our future growth? For example, are we able to grow? Are we, as GetAccept, a venture-backed company? That will affect our ability to raise future funding and growth rounds based on those growth metrics. So there's a lot of things that needs to go into this thinking: how you price, how you choose to discount, who you sell to, and how you retain your clients.
Amazing thought. Yeah, spot on. And as we might wrap it up on that point, a bird in hand is better than two in the bush. So I was looking for some birds right now to illustrate that point, but I don't have any on hand. So if someone does propose a little bit of a discount and the money's on the table, just take it. Don't be selfish. Don't follow the rigid rules around discounting. Make your quote to cash process flexible enough to support your growth. So as you can see in the comments, you can connect with all of us on LinkedIn. It's been a GetAccept and Chargebee production. And Eric and Carl, thank you for joining us with some amazing insights. Any final message before you sign off? And I know, Eric, you're near the snow territory, right, in Park City right now. So you've probably got a lot to do after this.
There's no snow on the ground, though.
Not even a little bit?
No, none at all. So, no, thank you. I mean, this is definitely something that, is we're spending a lot of attention, because, again, simplicity sometimes wins, right? And building long-term relationships is what it's about.
Perfect. And Carl, any not final words, but last words for this webinar?
I'm going to add to what Eric said. Try to think simple and be proactive. Rethink what you've created and eliminate parts that are not necessary today and that doesn't support your growth. So keep it simple, be proactive.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward to bringing you another webinar again soon. And thank you for participating via the polls in chat. We really appreciated your presence. Thank you again, and have a good day wherever you are around the world. Take care for now.